is these, these road corner intersection bump outs where you basically, as a car is coming down the street, have the requirement to, make a sharp turn as opposed to a wide turn. And what does that do? If you're making a wide turn around the road, you can do it at a high speed. If you're forced to make a sharp turn, what are you doing? You have to slow down. And what goes in that area that was otherwise roadway? Well, you can put a lot of different things there. You can put a little parklet. You can put bike parking. And I'm done, it looks like.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I think there's a couple things to that, and a lot of this we already started, and we're well on our way. We've made the commitment, and we started down the road of protected bike lanes, not only Grand Street, expanding it. I touched on the fact as well about the bike master plan, and I think we have a track record on these sort of things of hiring the best and brightest and working with the community group hand in hand on this sort of thing. We also have put out a website so the community can see all of the things that we are working together on with Bike JC and Safe Streets JC and all the different initiatives, including bump outs at the corners, including looking at the city's master plan. At the end of the day, though, I think it's not only the city side from a policy standpoint, there also is a cultural change that needs to change as it relates to the city as a whole, where it's not vehicular dominant, and that's not the culture that we're looking for long term. I think that with partners like you have in this room and some of the work that we already started, I think we're well on our way to doing a lot of this stuff, but I don't think it happens overnight. So I think some of the structural changes for government, I think really looking towards things like Vision Zero, which we said earlier, and then some of the simple changes which both Bill and I agree upon as far as changing the way the roads are structured. And hopefully we get that going. I think we're well on our way to achieving that.
Okay, this next thing is like lead by example. Everybody always says lead by example, right? So I ride a bike every day all around the city. That's how I get around. I have a car, but I hardly ever use it. So National Bike to Work Week is the week of May 14th through the 18th, 2018. So the question is, will you guys lead by example and commit to biking to and from work during this time and making this a car-free week for your schedule? And will you encourage your staff and the city employees to also participate?
I'll go first on that one.
Go for it.
I think we're both going to agree that we're both more than willing to do that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Our next person to ask a question is Andy Kaplan. He's a downtown resident, and he's also a traffic engineer. Andy, take it away.
Thanks, Patrick. Good evening. So you talked a little bit about Vision Zero. One of the central parts of Vision Zero has been the coordination within the city government to work together from different groups, and challenging in many municipalities, but in Jersey City, the responsibilities for streets is divided between at least 4 departments. Planning's in the Department of Housing, engineering's under the business administrator, construction and repairs in the Department of Public Works, and of course the police and parking enforcement are within public safety. It's challenging. No one person or office is responsible for coordinating the activities of these groups or managing the overall goals of improving traffic safety and overseeing the holistic and efficient process for implementation of safety measures. Other cities that have prioritized traffic safety and adopted Vision Zero have either centralized their transportation services or at least created processes to coordinate them better. At the April 2017 Safe Streets meeting, Mayor Fulop agreed to establish a working group to bring together these city departments to look at traffic safety issues across departments. The first results of new projects are just starting to be seen, but with data like 585 pedestrians struck last year, much more is needed to make our existing street-focused staff, who do a great job, work better together in a holistic manner to make their efforts more effective. So, Mr. Matkudis, if you would answer the question first, and both candidates would have 2 minutes, please. This question is, will you work with the City Council to promote and establish a Department of Transportation, led by a dedicated, qualified Director of Transportation, to centralize work affecting streets and with a core mission of improving transportation safety. Please talk to us about what this would look like under your leadership and how you'd measure the success of a group like this.
I definitely think there needs to be greater coordination. You know, just talking today and thinking about this debate and talking to a couple of people who worked for and do work for the city and who do planning, one of the things that came up was that there's not enough coordination on these issues that deal with traffic safety or transportation. When I first hear of a Department of Transportation, I'm like, well, we don't have we don't have a train system, we don't have a subway system, we don't have a ferry system. Maybe we will have a bus rapid transit. Certainly a division of it, but the most small amount would be having people coming together regularly who are responsible for all of these elements of it. You know, parking enforcement, police, and the traffic engineers, as you say, all have different roles to play in pedestrian safety. Now, I think them getting together is probably smarter than saying, well, we're going to have police inside of a Department of Transportation, right? I don't think you mean that. So maybe we would know things like, well, we shouldn't get rid of the motorcycle unit, which the police claim is a problem that has maybe led to less enforcement on certain roads. And if we had planners talking to engineers, I'm sure we can learn other things as well. So all those groups need to come together without a doubt to come up with the best policies that make sense.
Okay, so we could clap. One of the things that I touched on at the beginning is restructuring government. I've been in this job for 4 years at this point, and I have a pretty good understanding of what works and what doesn't work, and I have a pretty good track record of significant changes where I felt things weren't efficient. We eliminated autonomous agencies from the JCIA. We eliminated the parking authority to bring it back into the city government. We changed things within the HEDC and the business administrator's office. And as we got closer working with some of the projects that you referenced with Safe Streets and Bike JC, and we have that working group that's working towards some of these solutions, it became abundantly clear that just simply sitting together once a week or once a month wasn't enough in order to really move the ball forward to where we want it to be. So, I'm wholly committed to moving those pieces into a place where there's a one-stop shop for transportation issues. And that would be including a liaison into some of the other entities that work with the city, as well as structurally working on the engineering issues and safety issues and enforcement issues that pertain to traffic, vehicular traffic, as well as pedestrian issues, as well as cycle issues as well. So absolutely committed to it.
Great. I'd just like to ask a very quick follow-up to both candidates on this question. Would you be willing to commit to bringing in a qualified director of transportation to lead these efforts? Mr. Follett?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you look at our Director of Health and Human Services, our Director of Planning, our Director of the Police Department, I think that you'd be hard-pressed to argue that their resume is anything short of qualified for any job like that in the entire United States of America. And we have a very strong track record of that. And I would be 100% committed to doing the same exact thing as it relates to somebody leading a division or department of transportation for the city, because I think that's important. The leadership matters in these things.
Great, thank you. Mr. Matsakudis?
Yes, I absolutely think we need to have those decisions made by people who, or at least have the input from those people who are experts in the field. If I look at all the departments that the mayor's appointed, I would probably disagree about whether or not that's always been the case, especially the people that oversee the planning, for example. So I would disagree on that point. But more importantly, to answer your question head on, is absolutely. We need people. We had a transportation, but unfortunately a lot of the great planners in the city have left. But we had a great person who was a transportation planner, and we need
Right.
You know, more than one probably to work in this city. We're a city that's going to be, you know, approaching 300,000 people, and a world-class moniker that we like to call it. So yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, go ahead. Just keep it, please, to brief.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that when we talk about qualifications of planners, we hired a new head of planning. I mean, I think her credentials are impeccable. Harvard educated, Cooper Union educated, resident of Jersey City, worked for some of the biggest planning firms in the entire country on some of the largest projects in the entire country, ran a community group in Jersey City here. I think you'd be hard-pressed to argue that she wasn't qualified for the job. So I want to point that out.
Okay, thank you. Great. Moving on here. Our next question, I hope he's here, is from Bertram Okpokwasili. Forgive me, Bertram. Hope I got that correct. Bertram is an attorney, parent, and advocate, active resident of the Van Voorst Park Association and neighborhood.
Thank you. Good evening. Illegal and dangerous parking is not adequately enforced and often contributes to crashes and injuries to pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists alike. Parking enforcement does not have sufficient staffing, training, or technology to adequately address these violations, including dangerous illegal parking like blocked crosswalks, double parking, and blocked bus stops, impaired sight lines with cars parked too close to corners. And we also know that residents see parking as a key quality of life issue. Mr. Fulop, will you please answer the question first? Mr. Fulop, will you answer the question first? You will each have 1 minute for your response. The question is, as mayor, what will you do to increase capacity and capabilities within the Parking Enforcement Division? What will you do to make this department more accountable? Thank you.
Thank you, Bertram. So, this is a place that we've made progress and we're working with the community on. Let me start by saying that we've changed the parking zones in the Heights, expanded that ordinance. We have a working group downtown with each of the community associations totally revamping the parking situation downtown. We expanded for the first time to have enforcement on weekends and overnight of the parking authority for people who are parking illegally. And we're updating our technology as well as with the director and those community groups. So in a short minute, I could tell you that we have a lot of projects and a lot of progress that has been made around this issue. Far from where we need to be. On any given month, we do about 25,000 parking tickets. So we have really ramped that up significantly per the community demand. And I think we have a lot more to do, but I think we are well on our way, and I think there are tangible results that I could point to.
I just want to begin by saying I wasn't disparaging the new planning director. I heard great things. She's got great credentials. She doesn't run that department. But let's talk about your question, which is enforcement. And I think part of the problem here is that there's not enough enforcement, that not only for parking in dangerous areas, which I don't think people, frankly, I wasn't as aware how dangerous it is to park next to a corner, but for really listening to Safe Streets JC. And it's really come to my knowledge now, right outside of my house, people park on the corner every day. And the problem is I don't know if there's someone coming down the street. So I kind of have to like go slow, beep the horn sometimes. It's like I'm driving around a mountain or something. You know, there was a budget of $7 million a year in the parking authority. I don't know what it is now. I know we only lost like 4 people when we did the merger. At least, you know, we're not retained. We have $14 million a year in parking tickets. I don't think we're doing enough to get that money in, because enforcement should be making money, not losing money, right? And there's no reason why we shouldn't have more people enforcing the laws. That's the main thing, is not the new zones. That's important too, but enforcing it. And again, the curb bump outs will stop people from parking next to the intersections. Right. Put those in, and guess what? You can't park there anymore. You can't have that temptation. Right.
Great. Thank you. I guess we should have had a little more time on that question. Sorry, we didn't gauge that right. Did you have anything else to add, Mayor Fulop, since Mr. Massacutis took a little extra time? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And just so everyone understands, our goal is not to be punitive with parking. We understand parking is tough. I mean, for everybody, tough everywhere. But it's the issues of the stuff that's impacting safety and people getting hurt and potentially killed that we're really concerned about. So I just wanted everyone to understand that. We know parking is a very sensitive issue with a lot of different elements to it, but that's why we brought it up tonight. Thank you. So, Patrick. Sorry, forgive me.
The next person I want to introduce is Bridget D'Souza, parent of a child at PS number 3 downtown and member of St. Aidan's Church here on Bergen Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. The truth about a city's aspiration isn't found in its vision, it's found in its budget. Each of you is well acquainted with the city's budget and administrative processes. Mr. Matsakudis will answer the question first. You will each have 2 minutes for your response. As mayor, what would you do to fund an expansion of complete street improvements to make our roads safer for all users? Please be specific.
Well, if you're looking for like an exact number, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you. But I can tell you that we will fund it. And the way I look at this is through community input, through expert input from your staff and your cabinet, if you will, the directors. Try to identify what streets in Jersey City make sense first. And I think we're already hearing that from the community. We're talking about Grand Street. We're talking about Bergen Avenue. Then come up with, through maybe even, you're probably going to have to hire a firm, an engineering firm, to come up with some of the concepts. Once people tell you what would work and what won't work, then you put it out to bid and you get it done. So like, why can't Grand Street have a protected bike lane and less vehicular lanes and a green strip as well? It can happen, and you'll have people not going 50 miles per hour down there and killing people, and it will be a lot more beautiful and fun to use. So, it's simply about making it a priority. You're absolutely right. Where your priorities are is what you put in your budget. And, I think that first and foremost, it's literally going to save lives, but it's going to enhance the quality of life in so many ways when you're able to ride a bike without being afraid. And I think that when you look at the complete streets that exist, and by the way, most avenues in Manhattan have elements of complete streets, right? Sometimes they use the parking as the barrier for the bike lane. It's not rocket science. It could be done, and I think it's pretty affordable.
Okay. You could clap. All right, so I think there's two parts to that, and I think that we are well on our way, as I touched on earlier. The first, I think, is the master plan process that we're going through right now. And I think that'll give us a framework for what the needs are and a better understanding of what the cost will be. And then we will ultimately start the project. But how you do that project also is important. One thing I did 4 years ago, which has been successful, is we expanded our grants office, how we pursue them, and we've ultimately increased exponentially the dollars, millions of dollars awarded back to Jersey City. Just yesterday, we got another $40,000 grant to increase enforcement actually on Kennedy Boulevard from the NJTPA, which is a regional association. My point on that is that once we finish what we started on the planning portion, so consider that in 2018, at that point we go out and we pursue it from a grant standpoint. The last thing I want to do is spend your money. I've tried to be very, very judicious on that over the last couple of years, and I've learned that there are a lot of opportunities across the country to solicit dollars for things like this because there are a lot of people interested in it. And so I think that we could achieve what you're looking for, and we could do it at a minimal cost, and I think we both share the perspective in the fact that we're committed to it.
Great. I'd just like to ask a brief follow-up on that, actually, on this question. And you both touched on this a little bit in your answers, but and I'll give you each a minute to answer this. How's that? How will you leverage the city's grants department, revenue streams from developers, which we haven't tapped into or touched on yet for complete streets, and revenue generating departments within the city to help fund traffic, so safety and access? So for example, the parking department, for better or worse, it is a revenue generating department. That money should be looked at as a source to help implement some of these life-saving tools that we need. So talk a little bit, if you would, first, Mr. Matsakudis, about how you would use all those different combinations of things?
Well, I think we have to be aggressively searching, for the grant opportunities that exist. Off the top of my head, I don't know if what's out there for complete streets, for example, but I know that the city gets a lot of has in the past gotten a variety of funds for different transportation initiatives and road improvements and such. I think that we really have to make sure that when developers are building buildings that have an impact on roads, right, that we're really leveraging them to the utmost of our ability. And I don't think we've done a really good job of that. I think that there's money sitting on the table, for example, down in the on Green Street from buildings that were built there. So when these buildings are going up, we need to utilize, and they do this incidentally in the suburbs, right? They do this when they're saying, hey, you're going to build some cul-de-sac over here with a bunch of houses, you're going to make A, B, and C improvement. That's an opportunity to say, hey, what can we do for the streets around here? And make them pay for it.
Sure, and you did already touch on some of this in your answer, but I was just wanting to learn more about how you would leverage different revenue streams, perhaps some that have been untapped, like the city's grant department you mentioned, revenue streams from developers, and revenue generating departments such as parking.
Yeah, so we've been successful on expanding our grants department and awarding multiple millions of dollars per year that we never had an opportunity to get before, because we've professionalized it, been more aggressive and deliberate in how we do it. The best example, and as it pertains to something that we're discussing here, is that for the first time in the history of the city, we've been able to get the Bloomberg Foundation involved in Jersey City with real dollars. Now that's kind of a natural fit if you think about it, because it's something that he's been conscious of when he was the mayor of New York City, and it's something that he has a relationship with Jersey City at this point, so we could clearly go after that. I want to touch on a little bit on the developer front as well, because we do go after them where we can on multiple things, whether it's building new schools, whether it's affordable housing, where we can to expand and work around traffic. The best example of that is in Journal Square. When the towers come up in Journal Square, ultimately, part of that plan is changing where the taxi stands are, making it more pedestrian friendly, and changing the entire traffic flow there to make it less vehicular focused and more traffic focused. And so that all is part of how we're thinking about these things. And just the final point on this, Kara, is that as developers come forward, what you're seeing is a larger trend of them focused on bike rooms, not only parking decks, bike rooms, where people can store their bikes in a safe, secure place, how they're designed, and those are natural fits also, where we go after those people saying, hey, not only are you interested in the bike in your building, but maybe there's an opportunity for synergies on the road as well.
Great, thank you. Great. I'm going to take this next question, because unfortunately our resident questioner is running a little behind. So this next question is about schools. In many parts of Jersey City, school students are either bused or driven to school. Studies show that up to 20 to 30% of morning traffic can be generated by parents driving their children to school and by busing. One reason for this overbusing and drop-offs is that parents may not feel it's safe for their children to walk or bike, often due to the lack of safe routes to school. We must change that. We'll ask Mr. Fulop the question first, and you will each have 2 minutes for your response. As mayor, how will you work with the school district to identify and create more truly safe walking and biking routes to school to reduce overbusing and parental drop-offs? And how will you work with the school board to expand traffic safety education at all levels of schooling in Jersey City?
So it's I meet regularly with the school board members, particularly Jerry Lyons and Marilyn Roman, and one of the things that we are working on together that we are waiting for them to get over to the city is the safe street routes that they wanted. And we made a commitment that we would fund them with additional traffic crossing guards. Now, we're at the point that we are waiting on that information from them. I'm sure they would tell you this as well from the administration. But the point of that is that we are working together already towards solutions on that front. The second part is regarding traffic guards, which is a long-term challenge for the city because of the hours that they work and the compensation that they were being paid. One of the things that I did do in our second year here is recognize that problem, and we escalated the compensation packages for our crossing guards, thinking that we would be able to get more of them involved. It has been a challenge, and it's been a challenge to retain them as well. You have some that have been there for decades, but you have others that are only there for short periods of time. So it's a focus of ours, and if you know people who want to be crossing guards and qualified, we're always looking. Thank you.
Yeah, this is about having close coordination with the Board of Education, the members of the board, and the superintendent. And it's, to me, pretty simple. It's simple to identify the need for each school that exists. I think part of it may also be a fear about safety. In addition to cars, it could also be a safety of crime as well. And look, when it comes to the biking lanes, it's tough for to say recommend in a city like Jersey City, at least in some of the neighborhoods, to send a 10-year-old out on a bike. If you had protected bike lanes, of course that would be easier. So I think it goes back to that as well. But I think at the end of this, by and large, what the mayor said is get the input from the school system, which is mandating this, and then work with them to come up with the solution about walking. But it all boils down to the overall same theme of the night, which is if it's pedestrian safety for the people in this audience, it's going to be pedestrian safety for the kids that are walking to school. If you are keeping cars